Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Zenbird Journal, where the Zenbird team shares insights behind the interviews that we do. And today we'll be talking with Ayam, who visited the Center of Tokyo Raids and War Damage in Tokyo, and to learn about the Tokyo Raids. Now, the Tokyo Raids happened during World War II. It was actually overshadowed by the unprecedented nuclear bombings in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But it's important for us to also to remember that such a tragedy happened in Tokyo before. So, yeah, before
Yes.
we jump into the details,
Mhm.
can you share with us what is the Tokyo Raids?
Sure. So Tokyo Race happened in 1945, and it started on March 10th.
Mhm,
It killed more than 100,000 people and
mhm,
mostly civilian lives.
right.
The number of the estimated casualties
Mhm,
was more than those from the day of the nuclear bombing in Nagasaki.
mhm,
Um, and it targeted Tokyo civilians, which was brutal, and but that means that it targeted people, including women and children.
mhm. Now, it sounds like a very horrible incident.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, let's stick to the center first. So as
Mhm.
I understand, the Center of Tokyo Raids and War Damage is something like a museum.
Yes, it's a small museum in
Hmm.
Tokyo,
Right.
and it is the only museum dedicated to documenting Tokyo Race, actually.
Mhm,
And the museum was originally founded by general donations, and it's operated by a private foundation.
mhm. The
Mhm.
only museum that's covering Tokyo Raids. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I know documenting history is important. I mean,
Mhm.
even like for Hiroshima and Nagasaki
Yeah.
bombings. Yeah, but is there other reasons why the museum exists?
Yes, let me quote their big mission. They
Uh
have
huh.
a big mission to strive for peace
Mm-hmm.
in the future by communicating the horrors of war.
Mm-hmm.
That's the wording they use. And so, yes, they put emphasis on sustaining peace, but they also dedicate themselves to documenting and communicating the event and passing down the stories to the next generations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they believe that that's the most powerful reminder not to take ordinary peace for granted.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Um, And also, surprisingly, there are few museums dedicated to memories of wars in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Although we have so much history and so many stories to share from the past,
Mm-hmm.
it seems that fewer people have opportunities to learn about wars than before.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why this kind of museum is has such so much value, I
Mm-hmm.
think, and it's worth a visit with a small entrance fee of 300 yen per adult,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes towards keeping the museum running.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Mm.
I think we should all do make a visit to the museum. And it's important that this museum exists. Like you say, it's the only museum that's talking about the Tokyo raids.
Mhm.
And but yeah, so now there are a lot of ways to share history. So how does the museum communicate about the war and about Tokyo raid?
Yeah, well, it emphasizes on the storytelling of the
Mm-hmm.
survivors. You can listen to recorded stories of survivors when you visit the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also read their stories about the time of the race at the
Mm-hmm.
exhibition. Um, and I believe they are as authentic as it can get if you want to learn about what really happened to these people and the city of Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and since the COVID started, they have started to hold events online,
Mm-hmm.
and survivors were invited to tell their stories online for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
First time.
So
Okay.
first
Interesting.
time.
Mm,
Yeah. Also, school trips and guided tours are a big part of what the museum
Mm-hmm.
offers.
Right.
Um, Volunteers guide children around the museum, and they also perform kamishibai.
Mm-hmm.
Kamishibai is
Right.
one of the traditional ways to show and tell
Is
stories.
the one where there's number of paper,
Yes,
number of
yes,
drawings, and they switch
yeah, yeah.
painting.
They
Right. Okay.
yeah they have
Right.
like kind of story
Mm,
boards
right.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And recently, more young volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
including college students, taking on this role, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
great.
Okay. So when we're talking about role, as in not just playing the part to how to say to do the kamishibai, or what is more of the role of passing down the stories, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so they are learning about the words themselves too, and
Mm-hmm.
then learning about how to communicate those stories from the past.
Mm-hmm. Now
Yeah.
I really like that because I went to Hiroshima,
Oh. Mhm.
and yeah, and of course I visited the museum there, the Peace
Mhm.
Museum, and
Mhm.
something I learned that peace is not something that it exists
Mhm.
as a natural state. It's something that we need to build, we need to work at,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And it's actually very heartening to see the next generation
Mhm.
taking an interest to actually keep the memories alive. Mm.
Yeah. That's
Mhm.
very important. I think so too. Yeah.
Mhm.
So one interesting about discussion about wars is that isn't quite happening, and it had like it kind of is taboo to talk
Mhm.
about,
Mhm. All right.
especially in educational setting.
Mhm.
So we are taught the facts,
Mhm.
yes, well, some of the facts, not everything, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that the students never get to talk about what they felt about the incidents, how
Mhm.
they feel about them. They're sharing their opinions isn't
Mhm.
very usual thing
Mhm.
to
What?
do.
Why do you think why is that the case?
Um, I don't. I kind of think that it's a cultural. It has to do with cultural thing,
Mhm.
and then also the attitude is quite passive
Mhm.
when we learn at school
Mhm.
or when we listen to stories from our seniors. We have
Mhm.
to be really polite, and
Mhm.
we don't say our opinion, right?
Right. Right. It
Yes.
is. Mhm.
So it's kind of an difficult environment to have honest conversations.
Mhm.
Yes,
Right.
and
Mhm.
not many people question.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Hiroshima-san, the guide, was talking about that as well at the
Uh-huh.
museum.
Yeah.
They lead many tours for children, and Japanese children tend not to ask questions, and they
Mhm.
just listen passively.
Yep.
Um, I'm sure it's not all the cases, but many kids just listen.
Mhm.
And they also lead students from international schools as well. And
Mhm.
Hieshima-san noticed the difference because those students tend to ask more questions and share what they thought of what they saw at the museum.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's an interesting observation, I thought.
That is very interesting. That is
Mm,
very interesting. I was thinking, I was listening to you and Matsuda talking about
mm.
about the war in your previous recording, and I realized, probably you need external help to bring that discussion along.
Yes, I wonder what kind of, you know, communication style happening
Mhm.
in other countries about wars. I'm
Mhm.
sure, there are discussions at school
Mhm.
or in the community, and I'm quite sure we can learn something from that
Mhm.
situation. Mm.
Yeah, that's true.
When the guide and the curator Hiroshima-san
Mhm.
told me that they want the visitors to feel the personal connection with the history by learning about these individuals
Mhm.
here. And he was pointing at one picture of a family who died in the race.
Mhm.
And I really agree. Personal connection is the key
Mhm.
because it's very important to empathize with what
Mhm.
our ancestors went through
Mhm.
and what some of us are going through as we speak.
Yeah,
Um,
interesting.
mhm,
And that's very interesting. I think the key word here, personal connection, is really important.
mhm,
Um, but I also see what I would guess is a problem. If we talk with the young people, the younger generation of today, they will feel the personal connection probably if we talk about um with environmental issues because of
mhm,
climate change, or talk about health because of the COVID situation.
mhm,
So 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 my question here is probably about the Tokyo rates. Will you say that a lot of Japanese, or or even the people living in Tokyo,
mhm.
remember and or understand the Tokyo rates?
But that's a good question. And the answer is no, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think so.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that there are not many opportunities for us to learn about them in detail,
Mm-hmm.
especially for younger generations.
Mm-hmm.
My generation seem to learn more about wars in school or from our grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
but children today have less of that, I believe.
So
And
I guess they don't learn about Tokyo rates in school.
no, actually not. There are movies about it, which is
Mm-hmm.
quite famous.
Right.
Hotaru no Haka, or
Mm-hmm.
that's based on the Tokyo Race.
That's the Ghibli
Hmm.
Ghibli show, right? The
Yeah,
gr-
yes,
when graveyard of the fireflies.
yes, yes, that
Okay,
one.
the very sad.
Yeah, it's very sad.
Mm,
And unless they watch something like that or read
mhm,
anime about it, they don't have the opportunity to learn about it in detail.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
um, and they also have other issues to study, like natural
No,
disasters,
yeah, yeah.
including 311,
Mhm.
mm, nuclear.
Kumamoto floods. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm,
So peace education isn't a priority anymore, seems
mhm,
like. That's why I think it's important that we communicate about war and peace to the next generations in our own ways.
mhm. Right.